Most people like to believe they are fully in control of their minds. They imagine they are steering every thought and every decision with conscious intent. This assumption, however comfortable, breaks down under even modest self-reflection. But the truth is more unsettling. Most of our psychological activity occurs beneath awareness, following patterns we neither designed nor fully understand. In a very real sense, we are strangers to ourselves. What we notice on the surface is only the dashboard. Beneath it sits an enormous and complicated software system running on even more complex hardware. And if a person never learns how this inner guidance system works, how it defaults, where it usually leads, or how to override it when it sends them in the wrong direction, they risk drifting through life without direction. At best, they reach a destination devoid of meaning. At worst, that destination can be disastrous. Being one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung dedicated his career to charting this invisible terrain. His mission wasn't purely academic. It was a practical pursuit of psychological wholeness. He wanted to develop a methodology that could bring these hidden structures into a functional relationship with the conscious mind. Jung's early life provided the raw material for these theories. Born in Switzerland in 1875 to a modest rural pastor and an eccentric woman who often claimed to see spirits, Jung's childhood was defined by isolation and introversion. He spent long stretches of time alone, absorbed in imaginary worlds, projecting ideas onto his surroundings, drifting into daydreams, and quietly analyzing the adults around him. School did not come easily. Jung struggled academically and even fainted at times to avoid going. But as he grew older, and after his father expressed concern over his future, Jung changed course. He turned inward and then forward. He threw himself into learning on his own, devouring works of philosophy and religion. After finishing secondary school and deciding against a life in the church, he chose to study medicine at the University of Basel. He completed his medical degree at the University of Zurich and began working at a psychiatric hospital under the respected psychiatrist Eugen Bleuler. After several years, Jung left the hospital and opened a private practice. As his reputation grew, he eventually met the most influential psychologist of the era, Sigmund Freud. Their first encounter lasted nearly 13 hours, a single conversation. That meeting sparked a deep friendship and a strong professional partnership. They traveled together, lectured together, interpreted each other's dreams, and debated the growing complexities of their theories. But Freud was older and far more established. This created a natural dynamic in which Freud acted as both mentor and father figure. As Jung's own ideas evolved and his reputation expanded, tension grew between them. Their disagreements became impossible to ignore. Freud insisted on a strictly scientific and reductionist approach. Jung, however, saw patterns that transcended individual experience, universal symbols and recurring themes that suggested a layer of mental organization far deeper than personal history. Combined with Jung's desire for professional independence, the split became inevitable. Their friendship ended in 1913. What followed for Jung was a period of profound psychological crisis, lasting approximately 5 years, what he would later describe as his confrontation with the unconscious. During this time, Jung deliberately turned his attention inward, treating his own psyche as an experimental subject. He documented dreams, visions, and fantasies. He allowed himself to encounter psychological material that most people spend their lives avoiding. The process was deeply destabilizing, but it laid the foundation for everything that followed. From this crisis emerged Jung's mature model of the psyche, a structure of immense depth. Jung's central goal became clear: to develop methods that could unite the psyche's many parts into a single, coherent whole. It helps to look at Jung's model of the psyche, which he divided into 3 main layers: consciousness, the personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. At the surface is consciousness, organized around the ego. The ego is the architect of our identity. It provides the continuity that allows us to say, I. It is the storyteller that keeps our self-image stable and coherent. To navigate the social world, the ego projects a persona, the mask or social role we adopt to meet cultural expectations. The persona is a strategic necessity, but it is not the authentic self. It represents who we think we should be in order to secure acceptance. Maintaining this mask requires constant filtration. The ego allows only information that fits its preferred narrative to remain in a light. Everything else, impulses, memories, or desires that conflict with the ego's image, is pushed into the personal unconscious. This becomes the repository of our excluded personal history, out of sight but never inactive. It continues to influence our behavior from behind the scenes. Jung's most radical proposal was the existence of a third, deeper layer, the collective unconscious. He argued that we are not born as blank slates, but with an inherited psychological foundation shared by all humans. Just as we inherit physical traits through evolution, we also inherit psychological blueprints. Jung believed that human consciousness developed slowly over thousands of years and remains incomplete even now, leaving vast portions of the mind in darkness. Because each generation tends to imitate the previous one, an unbroken chain of psychological influence stretches back to the earliest humans. This creates a shared reservoir of inherited traits, predispositions, and memory-like patterns that each person receives at birth. Jung observed this in his clinical work, noticing recurring themes in dreams and unconscious material among patients with no connection to one another. He also found strikingly similar symbols and stories in myths and art across cultures separated by time and geography. He called these primordial organizing patterns archetypes. They appear in art, religion, and dreams, quietly shaping how we perceive reality without our awareness. Within the unconscious, Jung identified the shadow, the collection of traits, impulses, and potentials the ego refuses to acknowledge. The shadow contains our moral failings and dark impulses, but also suppressed strengths and unrealized potential that did not fit our social mask. It is, in Jung's words, our disowned self. He also identified the anima and animus, the contrasexual dimensions of psychological life. In men, the anima represents feminine-coded qualities excluded during the formation of masculine identity. In women, the animus represents masculine qualities similarly repressed. For Jung, psychological health required integrating these masculine and feminine energies, not suppressing them to conform to cultural norms. At the center of this dynamic system sits the self, the organizing principle of the entire psyche, where consciousness and the unconscious achieve relative integration. For Carl Jung, the self represents the most authentic version of a person, their true desires, genuine passions, natural abilities, and the full range of what they are capable of becoming. The central goal of individuation and of a life lived with meaning is to bring both the ego and the persona into closer alignment with this authentic self. Whether through therapy, introspection, creativity, or honest self-observation, Jung believed the psyche begins to speak only when a person is finally ready to listen. For Jung, the goal of a human life was not perfection, but integration. It meant bringing conscious awareness into relationship with the vast, hidden material of the unconscious. He believed this lifelong work was each person's responsibility. Individuation, the gradual integration of conscious and unconscious elements, was, in his view, the key to meaning and fulfillment. As he wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." To Jung, the self resembles an inner landscape shaped by light and shadow, clarity and confusion, intention and instinct. Becoming whole requires bringing these opposing forces into relationship, not denying them and not pushing them away. In this ongoing dialogue between what is known and what remains unrecognized, a person kindles a spark of light within the darkness of ordinary existence. The difficulty lies precisely here. Individuation demands acknowledging aspects of oneself that contradict preferred self-concepts. This path requires radical self-acceptance, and radical self-acceptance requires radical honesty. Each time a person examines a thought, feeling, or action, they must be willing to face what it truly reveals, even when it contradicts who they hope to be. Each of these moments is like stepping deeper into the stairwell of the unconscious and confronting the shadow, the hidden collection of flaws, impulses, and darker potentials the ego works hard to deny. The goal is not avoidance, but integration. Avoidance achieves nothing. Just as a physical shadow cannot be outrun, the darker aspects of the psyche cannot be escaped through denial. The real danger lies in ignoring them. Jung observed that virtue does not improve through exaggeration, and that minor evils grow when left unexamined. Shadows are inseparable from human nature, and it is only in complete darkness that shadows disappear. The work of individuation is therefore necessarily uncomfortable. Each genuine act of self-examination, each honest look at a thought, emotion, or behavior represents a descent into territory the ego has tried to keep hidden. And the deeper one ventures, the more challenging it becomes. One encounters not only personal memories and repressed experiences, but also archetypal forces, primordial energies connecting individual psychology to the human condition itself. Acknowledging the shadow allows a person to recognize and manage it when it rises uninvited into awareness. Healing begins with acknowledgement. One must first admit a problem exists before it can be addressed. While authenticity may sound simple in theory, the work required for true self-acceptance is anything but easy. It is the quiet, terrifying moment when you stop running from yourself. Complete insight into the vast architecture of the psyche may forever remain beyond our reach. To grasp even a fragment of genuine understanding is a life's work. It requires the courage to face our limitations, our capacity for destruction, and those parts of ourselves we have deemed unworthy. It asks us to recognize, within our own hearts, the same traits we judge or condemn in others, and to accept that the polished, idealized version of ourselves will always be an illusion. Such recognition does not merely inform the intellect, it unsettles the psyche at its deepest foundations. Yet according to Jung, this confrontation is essential for a full and meaningful life. His ideas offer tools to navigate this difficult terrain, helping individuals not only identify flaws in their inner navigation system, but gain access to the controls themselves, allowing them to steer toward destinations that genuinely reflect who they are and what they truly want. Remember, the world is just the echo. You are the voice.